Welcome back. In this video, we'll just be doing the exhaust, at least part of it. I'm just gonna focus on the exhaust in this video, but I'm not sure we'll do it all. I mostly just wanna get past the cats and have an O2 bung in place so I can do a first start. We'll see how far we get. Maybe we'll do all the way out back, I'm not sure. But let me show you what I've got, what we're working with. I have a full kit of 3-inch mandrel bent exhaust. It's all mild steel except this X pipe. I couldn't actually find it in mild steel and 3-inch, so it's stainless. I'll have to deal with welding the mild steel to the stainless. That'll probably be a little bit of pain, but the rest of it is mild steel. So we'll have, it's not really laid out in order, but we'll have from the collector, forget the U-shaped pipe there, into cats, then into the X pipe, and then into the cherry bombs. These are, I think, 23 inches if I remember right. There's the information, 20 inches, 3-inch straight. Mainly I bought them because of the 4-inch OD that they have, so they'll fit, they're pretty tight and narrow, so they'll fit well with the space I have to work with, and they're as long as I could get them to fit with the space that I'm working with and also fit the X pipe. So that's what we'll be working on. All right, I knocked out a couple of templates. This one isn't as well defined. It's harder to probably see on camera. I can see it in person, but this one was a little easier to see. These are the exhaust flanges. I'm gonna need to make some exhaust flanges out of some just thick plate steel for welding up a custom exhaust. So this is just a little thin piece of cardboard, not corrugated, and took a ball peen hammer and just kind of tapped around all the edges, and the dirt that's on that flanges kind of transfers and makes a nice template. So I know exactly where everything's at on these. I can cut them out. Well, I didn't film a whole lot of that, mostly because with the few hours I had after work this evening, I wanted to get it knocked out, and I was kind of not totally sure what I was doing, but I've got the center section done. This will be coming from the headers, and the Y is kind of to go around the transmission. I've already shoved it up in there, made sure it fits, and then this X pipe, and then straight into a couple of 20-inch glass packs. So hopefully that'll keep it reasonably quiet. That's about all the space I have underneath there. And then I fabricated a couple of flanges. This one's not done yet. The other one actually is done on the passenger side. The flanges on this are a 4-bolt flange. So there's actually one in each corner here. And it uses like a crush washer as a gasket. So I'm not doing that because the crush washer actually has to have some sort of like ring in there on the stock like Camaro LT1 setup. So I'm just going to use some Mr. Gasket Ultra Seal that you cut up. I think that arrived today. And then the collector is a 2.5-inch at the bottom of the header. So I actually went up just a little bit. This is like a little over 2.5. And then I'm using 3-inch exhaust tubing. So I am by no means an exhaust expert. This is, I think, the second exhaust I've ever done. But I'm using all 3-inch, and because of space constraints, I really didn't have. This is about all the distance I have below the bottom of the collector and where it starts to flatten out. So I cut a couple of slots and then just kind of hammer this down to maybe 2 3/4. I know it won't be, beautiful, but it should work. There might be a little bit of a lip, and then I'm going to file down the inside. You can kind of see I actually cut my V's just a little bit large. This will be the passenger side, and had to really fill it in to get it to stitch back together. So when I do the driver's side, I won't cut the V's as large. Live and learn. But this is about ready to put together in the passenger side. Like I said, I've already got the flange in there. It's bolted up at the moment. This is pretty much shaped the way I need it to be. And then it'll go into the cats that sit between the collector, flange, and the cat into the X, and then haven't figured out the back part, but it's almost midnight, so this is what I was able to get done tonight, and hopefully we'll be back at it tomorrow, and I can maybe get this thing on the road by the end of the week. All right, took a little break from the exhaust work this evening. Not quite as much time to finish up the wiring since I didn't have as much time this evening. I got the fuel pump wired into the ECU. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch the previous video. So that's wired in. I also wired in the fans and the electric water pump and the fuel level sensor all into the I/O ports for the ECU. And I also wired the fans and the electric water pump up to these 2 switches. So now, when I turn this on, the fuel pump, it only primed for 5 seconds as instructed by the ECU. Display's booting up there. I've not calibrated the fuel levels sensor yet, so that the sender, so that's not working yet. I haven't calibrated it, but I can flip these switches and get my fans, radiator fans, to come on, and the electric fuel pump or water pump. So now if I'm in a situation where I need to cool the car down without running it, I can run the electric water pump and the fans, and the car should cool down real quickly without the motor running. All right, I have my homemade flange for the collector made up and welded to this pipe. I don't know what it's called, directly after the headers. Not the prettiest welds, but it should be functional. I had to file down a weld just a little bit here to get a nut to clear. So next I am going to use a gasket material and make a gasket for this. One thing to note, I guess, is because I'm going up to 3-inch pipe, I think I said this previously, but there's a little bit of a step on the inside of here. That light is right in the camera. There's a step inside of here, so I'll know it's a little flatter on this side, but it does open up wider and then open up to 3-inch. So I know I'll create a little bit of turbulence there, but for the 5 horsepower, it matters. Maybe one day I'll redo this or have a professional do it, but for right now, it's going to get me on the road and get me pretty much there, except, maybe I'll lose 5 to 10 horsepower. So let me talk a little bit about this Mr. Gasket Ultra Seal exhaust gasket and just what I've learned here working with this a little bit. It is, I don't know, some sort of composite material, but there is also in the middle kind of a mesh. It's not solid metal in between, there's like a mesh. And so you've got to be careful, especially when drilling it, because it can catch one of those wires of the mesh and just kind of rip it out. In fact, here's my first attempt. It just kind of, the drill bit grabbed and then just ripped out this. So I would not recommend using any sort of drill bit with kind of a step like this. So first of all, I cut this out with some tin shears and it cut really easily. I didn't even try a bandsaw or anything like that. This worked perfectly, so I would use some metal shears and cut it. And then for drill, I went to basically the largest drill I had handy. I've got others, but without a step in the bit, and just drilled it lightly to get the hole started. And then came back with a burr on the Dremel to open up the hole to the proper diameter. You can see I was working with this and the template I had made for the flange. So that should be ready to go now, but just some little tips if you're working with this. Well, never mind, it's not ready to go. I got to cut out the middle still, but this I think I'm going to try and start a hole, burr it out a little bit, and then use the snips to open it up all the way. All right, another evening in the garage, and was able to get a good chunk of this exhaust knocked out. So everything is fully welded. I just painted it with some flat high temp black. I'll probably paint those, but I didn't have enough cardboard to go underneath them here in the garage and didn't want to paint all over the floor. So, but everything's fully welded out. I've got an O2 bung over there for the Terminator. I didn't put one on this side, but I can always do that in the future. The Terminator only has one anyway, so only this side is painted. So tomorrow I will flip this over and paint the other one. But at this point, I think we're good enough. This exits right just before the rear diff. So I think this might be good enough to get it mounted in tomorrow and maybe put a heat cycle on the motor, start it up and let it idle for a while and just kind of check over everything. I fixed my little oil leak. I've got brake fluid all over that tire right now. I need to wipe it off. Was bleeding the clutch up there and just kind of spilled it. So need to clean that off, but I got my oil leak fixed underneath there. Still might have a little bit of a coolant leak right here. I think this petcock is actually leaking. I think that's what's leaking here. But I should be able to mount this in tomorrow and put a heat cycle on the motor and also see what it sounds like with those mufflers. We are in. It was a bit of a chore. Some of those nuts are, like particularly this one, because of where it's at right up against the pipe. Took me a while to get that started and going in, but it's in there. Everything's secure. I put a hanger up here. It's solid mounted to the transmission, but the clearances are pretty tight around the transmission. So I kind of don't want it to move. Like if the transmission moves, I want the exhaust pipes to move with it so it maintains those clearances. And then we are out the back there. All right, got a couple issues taken care of this evening. One, I got a fuel gauge mounted up. This little $20 gauge off Amazon, I'll probably throw a link in the description, was much cheaper, like probably $200 cheaper than trying to go the route of trying to get it on this display or monitored by the Holley ECU and onto this display or the 3.5. So that was easy to do. And then we got this exhaust all welded up. I've got spray paint drying, high temp paint drying on this side. I'll flip it over in the morning and paint the other side, and then tomorrow evening we should be able to mount this up, and then really it should be pretty close to being put on the ground. I think I'll probably try and do a little testing with it still up on the blocks, but it should be pretty much well ready to put on the ground. One other thing to note was this belt was back and one rib up on the lip here on this power steering pulley. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but you can see it was kind of riding up on there after running it for a little bit. So I had 3 1/2-inch pieces of aluminum in here to space it out, basically 1.5 inches on this bracket from the head. I pulled one of those 1/2-inch pieces of aluminum out and put in a 1/4-inch piece of aluminum. So that should pull this back in line. It'll probably walk back another rib, maybe 2, just because this is where it's at after putting it on. I have not spun the motor at all, but it should be in alignment now fully with this space back about 1/4 inch. And there it is, all mounted up. I am really happy with the way this turned out. Relocating the fuel pump and the lines to up here instead of hanging down allows me to put the exhaust tips up above this bar, which I've always kind of wanted to do. Let me throw in some video here of what it looked like before with the tips down here. So what this allows me to do is to build a pretty reasonable rear diffuser. So I'll be able to take the lines of the floor of the car and then swoop up underneath and then attach to this bar here for a load so that I can actually pull down the back of the car and make it functional, because I want it to be a functional rear diffuser. So getting these exhaust tips above this rear crash bar I think looks sweet, and it'll serve functionality. So the one thing I need left to do is I'm gonna build like a little heat shield on this side that attaches to this metal bar here and just kind of keeps the heat off of the fuel lines. It won't be hot enough to cause a fire, but hot fuel does reduce your horsepower. So that'll be about it for this episode. Thanks for watching along, guys. Next step for me is to work on the idle a little bit, and I think I've got a tune scheduled for the next few days. So hopefully we can get that in and get this car driving. So the next video will probably be this thing pulling out of the garage finally after, I don't know, 8 months in the garage. I'm excited to be driving it again. Thanks for watching along, and I'll see you on the next one.